stood there, alone on the beach, listening to my amplified breathing, organising my thoughts. I felt claustrophobic, desperate to tear off the stifling plastic suit, to taste the cool, salty air. I could have done. There was no danger here on the mainland. But they'd spent ages taping the hood of my hazmat suit to my gas mask, and I didn't fancy replacing it in these conditions. I pulled a clump of tissue from my pocket, and after rubbing the visor, I could see my destination more clearly, though it didn't improve the view. Murky waves stretched seamlessly to the grey horizon. The island was nothing more than a dull, grass-covered rock, gravel spits jutting from beneath a hill at its nearest point, foaming rocks on the other side. Inhospitable, malevolent even. A dark, angular structure poked out from the long shadows behind the island, a huge, prowling shark floating in the murky dawn. I'd had a look at HMS Dauntless when we'd overflown her. Why the Royal Navy had sent a Type 45 destroyer to this tiny island had puzzled locals and crew alike. They'd been told it was part of her sea trials following a refit, though anyone could see the current conditions wouldn't test her. I trudged through the damp sand to where they'd left my gear, a toolbox and a kit bag of personal belongings. Grinyard Bay embraced the island, stretching round through windswept fields and twisted trees, dark mountains and darker sea. The tiny crofting settlement of Lade clung to the hillside further along the coast. A herd of white cottages dotted across the meadows, sweeping up from the waves. The ruins of its tiny medieval chapel were just visible, reduced to a pile of rocks through the streaked visor. Somewhere below Lade was a jetty. It would have been far easier to meet a boat there, but the crossing was far shorter here. Plus, those in charge hadn't fancied landing a military chopper in the middle of the village. I didn't blame them. God forbid the press got hold of what was going on. The drone of an outboard motor floated across the bay. I watched a speck grow into a small dinghy. As it buzzed closer, I could see a figure hunched at the helm, a Navy boatman bent double to avoid the worst of the freezing spray. As they approached, I swung the heavy kit bag onto my back. Tape ripped somewhere near my ear as the hood pulled away from my gas mask. The breeze tickled my hair. I shuddered, patting the tape back down. Reality kicked in, dropping heavy through my intestines. Despite the frigid air, sweat tingled my fingertips inside the rubber gloves. Was I crazy for taking the job? Wouldn't be the first time. Low risk, they'd said. Easy cash. I don't know if they'd been lying or mistaken. Either way, I'm selectively naive when I need the money. The outboard snorted as the helmsman beached it on the sand. He made no attempt to leave the dinghy, a moment of impasse as we regarded one another over the grumble of the motor. I could see now the guy wore overalls with a simple filter over his mouth. Total overkill for his task, I thought. Yet totally inadequate if things went tits up. "Tyler?" I nodded and picked up the toolbox, wading through the foam. "Get a wriggle on," he added. I briefly considered tipping the bastard out, but instead threw my gear into the dinghy and grabbed the side, dragging it back into the sea, turning it round on a wave. Tiny leaks in my suit soaked my jeans, filling my boots. Like air conditioning, it took my temperature down several degrees, something I hadn't thought possible. When I was waist deep, the helmsman twisted the throttle, which I took as a signal to haul myself in, facing him and the receding beach. Huddled in the grim trees, a lonely, whitewashed cottage watched us leave, curtains twitching. A postcard-perfect scene, ordinarily, but armed with the knowledge of where